Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Deportes Nation. I'm Alex Parra. Today, the beginning of a new soccer segment, and maybe all of you can help us name this segment. Not much about Alex Parra, but certainly with an expert. You can see him on screen. We welcome in Mr. Victor Araiza. First of all, Victor, good day. How are you?
Good day, Alex. Thank you for the kind words. Always glad to be on. People around town speaking the beautiful game, like you said. Hoping to make this here a recurring theme, speaking about our great sport and what better than the local aspect of it as well.
And look, we one of the foundations of what we want to do with this segment is speak from an objective point of view, and also the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think that makes us better, Victor, as a soccer community. You, as a sports journalist, you've been often the one in the press room asking the questions many fans want to hear and many media don't even want to think about. So we want to approach it from that way, not to be critical for the sake of criticism, not to be scandalous for the sake of being scandalous, but really, what do you, fans, want to know about the teams, want to know about what's going on in certain leagues? So Victor, maybe let's start with that. Your background as a sports journalist, really, there are few that are consistently covering our sport here in Houston. And I can't believe in a city so big, so diverse, that really there's not a lot of soccer coverage at all levels, the pro level, the college level, the youth level. I think there's a void there. The question is, why do you think that's happened?
I think a big part of it is investment. I think that's what it comes down to. There's not a lot of jobs that pay covering soccer, and not just here locally, just around the United States. I think that's been kind of one of the, as we see now this boom in MLS, another one, right, with Messi arriving, and I'm sure we'll touch on that. But is it kind of where MLS is a little bit ahead of itself, right, here with a major star again, just like it was with Beckham. Maybe when Pelé also joined the NASL back
Sure.
in those days, right? Where maybe the coverage of the game isn't up to that speed yet, because it isn't here in the United States. Like you mentioned, it's not covered as some of the other sports, and I think a lot of it has to do with the resources that local media outlets put to it, and then obviously the knowledge also of the people that are in some of these sports departments. I mean, that's not to knock them. I think that's just a truth, right? I mean, here in the United States, we grow with some of the major sports, and soccer to some isn't that. And I think that's part of it. We need more soccer people in some of these positions.
Victor, I'll give you an example. When the Houston Texans lose a game, which has happened often these days, the criticism, the coverage is huge. When Ben Olsen and company, focusing on the Houston Dynamo, lose a match, first of all, if there's consistent coverage, I'm shocked. And second, rarely are there really tough questions about why are you losing, about why are you not doing well. It seems to me, and we've talked a little bit about this off the air, a franchise like the Houston Dynamo, being objective, by the way, they can win or lose, and there's really no pressure from the media. There are a few fans that care and really want the team to succeed this season, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It appears that Ben Olsen's turning the team around, but General Manager Pat Onstad, I don't sense that the media are all over him. He's doing great segments in the morning, promoting soccer with Fox 26, but with all due respect, it's all light. It really isn't, hey, why aren't you winning? Isn't that the purpose of you being there? And I think because of that lack of pressure from the media, in this case I'm talking about, Victor, sometimes soccer franchises get a free pass relative to other sports.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's just a lack of coverage, of lack of interest. And yeah, when it is there, like you mentioned, it sort of sticks out like a sore thumb. Where if it was the Astros, the Texans, the Rockets, I mean, it's business as usual. It's every day. Fans are naturally in big numbers making these questions. Why is X player not participating? Why isn't he having minutes? Hey, so and so's injured. What's his status? Everybody wants to play the head coach, the general manager, and that's just understood, and it's not anything out of the ordinary with some of these other teams in town. And I would say again, I think across the American sports landscape, it is that way. Where with soccer, because there's so few, or whenever it does happen, right? It from all levels. It just seems like, hey, if you're criticizing, maybe it's because you don't want the sport to succeed, or when it's all the contrary, right? I think these deeper dives into the sport is what's going to make it advance. I believe, but I think, like you said, little by little, we're starting to see something. But I think for a long time, those of us who love the game just want to see it at a hyper speed if we can get it up to that point.
In the last couple of weeks, there's been a new revelation for MLS. I think we all know who we're talking about. Lionel Leo Messi has arrived. Not only is he helping his Miami team be consistent now on the field, by the way, finally picking up an MLS victory, at least regular season. The success of his team has been immediate. Let's pull back a little bit. Even though the media may be mispronouncing his name, at least they're talking about Messi. At least they're talking about soccer and the MLS. That's exactly, I think, what Don Garber wanted. That's exactly even what the Apple TV Plus people wanted, right? They wanted those eyeballs. It couldn't have come at a better time for Apple, number one, but also for the league in general. There's nothing but positive.
I think so. And you know what? The fact that it's a debate, the fact that it's there's different takes, again, just shows you what a superstar of this caliber brings. And obviously, we're talking about, what many consider the best in the sport, maybe the best ever. I know that, but even that's a debate. But the fact is, it spurs conversation, it spurs interest. Obviously the economic impact across the league, arenas like the Red Bulls, right? That have poor attendances. Why can't we get fans out here? What's going on? And Messi shows up and boom, right? I mean, it's a full house. That's why I think, it is positive. It is maybe sooner than expected, because I think this all happened so quick over the summer. We were all wondering, is Messi going to go back to Barcelona? Is he going to stay with Paris and try to win them a Champions League? And it's sort of like, nope, straight into MLS, straight into all the action, getting some wins. And obviously now it sets up this great storyline, because Miami was last in the overall standings. They may very well make the playoffs here, make a run, and at this rate they're going, they may win it all. And you know what? Again, that's going to bring up great conversation, because if they go from worst to champions, hey, why did they? Where's the state of the league? Is it just as easy as adding these superstars? I mean, I think it's great.
It's definitely sparked conversation. Let's go back a little bit. His impact in Leagues Cup, the first trophy that Miami has won. By the way, no Mexican team in the final. That speaks in and of itself of where the MLS is relative to other leagues. You were alluding to the quality of the league, I think, in some way, with a superstar, the GOAT potentially showing up here in the MLS. But the Leagues Cup made it exciting. It brought attention to that tournament. I think for many, it was a great first step. And actually, think about this, Victor, the intimacy of watching Messi play in soccer-specific stadiums in the United States. You mentioned Red Bull Arena. He played up in Frisco, where there's a limited amount of seats, but to have that experience, I think, is unique, and that's why also the value of those tickets is soaring.
No, absolutely, and look, I think some of these markets will defend themselves. Nashville, I'll give it to them, right? They've had some good attendances. I think it's been slowing down, but they've consistently shown up, and they got a bigger stadium than most, so I'll let them slide. Like you said, Frisco, okay, they've done a little bit better of a marketing job, and they've been getting people out there, the drone shows, whatever. But now this was a big payday. This was a lot of interest. Fans were there with several types of jerseys, right? Barcelona, PSG, Argentina, Miami, even the opposing team. And you're right, it's just sparking interest. It's going to continue to spark interest across the league. Some of these teams that have big stadiums, right? NFL stadiums, those are going to fill up here in the coming weeks. And it just shows you the impact that's why I think, it is the rising tide. If there ever was a time to use this description, right? The rising tide that lifts all boats here in MLS. I think the Leagues Cup was great, right? A month, obviously, for Apple. I think they're part here involved with the Messi salary structure. But it's great. It's something that's going to continue to build, especially now that because they won the Leagues Cup, they're going to be in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So there we're going to have the real debate, or at least at a different level, right? If MLS versus Liga MX, potentially a ticket for the FIFA Club World Cup. I mean, all this stuff, it's great for the region. It's great for the sport in the United States, and it's great for the league.
And let me give you a slightly different take that I've also heard. Well, you know, the superstars of the world come here at their later stage of their career. They make it a splash on the radar initially, and then what happens to the league? Let's cite a couple of examples. David Beckham, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Chicharito Hernandez, and now Lionel Messi. And that's just a few. And my point is, the impact is there. Messi could have a Cinderella story this season if, like you mentioned, Victor, the team goes and picks up the MLS Cup. That would be fantastic. Let's say they do well in U.S. Open Cup. But what happens in 2 or 3 years when we know getting close to 40, Messi won't be the Messi of old? Does that in any way affect the league to say, remember those days and now we're back to whatever this was? Is that a fair criticism that the impact is short-termed, but is that enough then to continue helping the league grow and improve?
I think so, because these are players at a high level, right? And again, it just, first of all, just the fact that they're on the field just brings the best out of competition.
Yeah.
You're seeing some of these other opposing MLS teams. You see them with a different motivation. You see them with a different spark, right? These games that have ended in ties, but maybe should have been wins or the pressure, right, that arrives at the end of some of these games, like it was in Dallas, that 4-4 draw in the League's Cup, the Nashville game, right? They came back, but they couldn't make the complete comeback. Philadelphia were supposed to be one of the better teams across the league. I mean, I think you see all these conditions that I would say it's almost like bringing, because we always talk about, the players got to go to Europe to play against the best. But when you're bringing the best to the league, I mean, it lifts that level. It's like bringing that European level to MLS. That's why I think it's positive. People say, who cares? The fact is they're here, that they're playing here. We get to see them here in this environment, obviously lifestyle and, something different for these players as well. But I think, again, if MLS is truly talking about wanting to be one of the best leagues, I mean, why wouldn't you bring the elite players? And again, my biggest thing is it's great because there's a lot of teams that have just cruise by on maybe some of the lower salary limits, on just having, fulfilling certain requirements, and aren't necessarily bringing superstars to their markets. Not that everybody has to, right? But I think it does lift the competition up, and it does make it an evolution of the league. And if other teams are staying behind, I say, hey, keep up, right? I mean, you guys, there's no rules against other teams spending, and there certainly isn't any rules against other teams. It's as fair as can be, right, with the salary cap.
Well, let's explore that a little bit, and we can kind of bring in the Houston Dynamo into this. One of the criticisms until last season was, why don't we have a superstar here? I appreciate the caliber of players that have come in, but finally, Hector Herrera came in last season. And we've seen the impact he's made at times, or maybe hasn't made, certainly not to the level of a Lionel Messi. Where I'm going with this, Victor, is the following. We know that the MLS is a single owned entity, meaning it's its own business. Everyone benefits. All of the owners pitch in. They buy in, if you will, to the league. And arrangements have been made. Don Garber realizes, if I need to be flexible here, we'll forget about that rule for the moment, and we'll do this because it helps all of us. Having Messi in the league, whether it was Miami or Houston or whomever, helps everybody. So we'll find the loophole, and there's nothing wrong with loopholes. This is a business, Victor. Why not find a way to be flexible and bring in those players? The question is this. Houston, you talk about spending. Is this the time now to think about bringing in a superstar a la Messi? I think Hector Herrera was it. Does he have a long-term stay here in Houston? I think that's yet to be determined from my perspective. But if every team is finding these players, the payroll's going to go up, the investment's going to go up. Is that what we should be thinking? Is this the start now of another golden era for the MLS?
Well, again, the beautiful thing is that it brings up all these questions,
Yeah.
right? Fans, media, it just makes you think. Does this team need this? Does some teams, for example, during the Leagues Cup, I asked Nico Estevez up in Dallas, hey, does your team need a world-class player like Messi? And he said, well, look, we're about the player development, right? That's the route we're taking. Here and there, they're going to go and spend on players, but for the most part, that's their philosophy, right? So that's why, different teams have different priorities, right? And I think that's kind of where it goes to. With Houston, right, for a long time, it's almost like, hey, where's the superstar player? Didn't have one. Finally brought in Herrera, who obviously the big appeal is the link to the Mexican national team and what he's done there, because I think if you take that away, respectfully, he's a great player, but I don't know if he'd bring you the rest of the qualities as maybe a boost in tickets.
It's great to have all of you with us that are finding us on our different social media, on our YouTube channel, etc. Questions, comments, send them our way. Most of you that follow us know how to do that, and we want you to help us to continue to build this segment. Victor, we talk about the Dynamo, we talk about Miami and Messi. They're meeting now in the U.S. Open Cup final. To me, one of my favorite tournaments, where even if you and I put together the Deportes Nation team and we had a miracle run, we could be playing in that final against Messi. I doubt that Uncle Alex could be on one of those teams, but that is the dream, Victor, of every semi or professional team in the United States. It truly is an Open Cup.
Right. And, the biggest thing here in the United States is that it comes with a spot in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, right? Which that's not the same for a lot of these domestic cups around the world. Right, you have to be a first division team. Here, I mean, like you said, if we made a team in a local league and we went all the way to the top, we'd have that berth to now the odds are low, but the chances are there, right? The pathway is there. And I think it's great to finally have, especially this matchup, just because of locally what it does. The Dynamo now are going to have worldwide attention in a final that's going to be broadcast around the world. The attention again that it brings, that's a great reward for a team that you have to give them credit in this sense. Wanted to go after this competition because, again, despite the fact that it comes with that CONCACAF berth, not a lot of teams prioritize it. Not a lot of teams really try, right, to win it, which obviously I think it's a shame sometimes. But hey, whoever wants to win it, the cup is there.
And Victor, let me ask you, this match coming up here this week on Wednesday in Miami, there are limited spaces when it comes to fans, but also to media. Let's explore that a little bit. Should the MLS say, listen, there are sports journalists that have been consistently covering MLS, like yourself, Victor. Should we give Victor a priority versus, oh, by the way, now that we've gotten to this point, finally somebody from quote-unquote mainstream media is showing up. Should they have the access? These are decisions that MLS has to make, and they can be difficult decisions because not everyone is going to be allowed to get in. Not everyone's going to have equal access. From a media perspective, what does MLS do? Do they turn their backs on who's been there for years and open it up now to the casual soccer media following this particular match? Who usually, if big media is following a U.S. Open Cup final? Very few. It's not even on the radar. Even the teams themselves, you've said this, Victor, play their second or third teams at times. So now that it's a big deal because of Messi in part, does that change the MLS media rules? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on who's handling it first, right? Because if this is the final, U.S. Soccer may step in and say, hey, we need a certain number of our media in there. I think they do a good job enough to where the local teams have a say, right? To be seen right here as it comes up. But I think for the most part, we've seen, understanding that one, obviously some of these stadiums are smaller, right? Like Miami's, that the capacity may not be there. Even if they raise it a little bit, it may not be there to accommodate you're talking about people all around the
Sure.
world that want to be there for that special moment. But I think for the most part, there is, at least I've seen it, I think there is a bit of a balance of, the international, national, big media outlets, and then, some of the local coverage, however big or small the outlet may be. But yeah, I've seen it. I think from the media departments that they have sort of prioritized that, as long as obviously they can accommodate.
And Victor, let's talk about that. You're scheduled to be in Miami this coming week. Are you excited if you are in fact going about coverage, about that final and the attention? And Houston, like you mentioned, great opportunity for Ben Olsen, for Hector Herrera, for this Dynamo team to be in the spotlight, at least for one night against the GOAT, Leo Messi.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great, right? Again, to be able to be in that spotlight. I think they may have missed an early opportunity, but again, all eyes of the world will be on this game. The will be select few that get to be there, and have that coverage. But even then, I think throughout some of these outlets all around the world, we'll get to watch the game. We'll see the highlights. Depending on what happens, who scores, who wins, that'll be a big topic of discussion. So, yeah, certainly, we're going to do our best to try to cover it and have, as much as we can of that story. Again, we live in such a digital world where, just people inside the stadium, everybody with their phone. I mean, you get different angle of the action wherever you look throughout social media as well. So there's the fan element too of just the reactions, the videos from the stands. And again, I think this is an important moment in our sport here in our country where it's just kind of escalating little by little.
Let's talk about that final and the Houston Dynamo in particular, a team that's coming from not so great to much better. Right now, Ben Olsen's team, by the way, picking up a 3-0 win away versus Real Salt Lake. How do you see the team these days, Victor? In previous seasons, mediocre would be success. Now it's a team that currently sits in a playoff position. They've made it to U.S. Open Cup final. I think the transition that Ben Olsen is a part of has been very positive. It's not the team that was here last season, certainly not the team that was here 2 years ago. It's a different look. Are Pat Onstad and his staff, and in particular Ben Olsen, headed in the right direction?
I think so. I think there's some positives, but and maybe here's where I get called negative at times. But to me, I'm sort of let's wait and see person,
Sure.
right? Throughout some of these seasons, and I'll tell you why. I think objectively, the MLS season is such a roller coaster. Houston has been at the bad end of those for a long, long time. Some might say, a lot of fans might say it is a bit of trauma, but I just think, when you look at them, it's been a great week. Not to take anything away from that, and obviously being in the final gives it a different taste. But when you look at the standings, there's still, a good stretch of bad games, or a bad stretch of games, I guess I should put it that way, could leave you out of the playoffs. Even with a month or so still to go, nothing's secured, right? Great win at RSL. Again, I think when we do a deeper dive, you look at some of the things, Houston does well. Some of the things maybe the other teams are going through. Portland, whenever they lost here 5-0, a team obviously in a bit of disarray. You think maybe something else is going on there with the coach who got fired right after that result. RSL, I think maybe weren't the same team. Maybe needed a little bit of reality check. Obviously, not the same from what they used to be earlier in the season. Maybe that Open Cup loss also. I think there's a lot of factors, right? Again, rotating the squad, you got to give the coach his due as well. But I will wait and see, just because I still think the teams behind them have plenty to work with as well. And I don't know how, before this story is completely told, I think there's still a safe for those teams. And I don't know if Houston did enough in the offseason to completely retool this squad to make them, a for sure playoff team. And that's my debate on that.
Look, winning is not easy. Winning takes time. Winning is a process, certainly for a team like the Houston Dynamo that has
Right.
gone through such disappointment, Victor, in many years. Fans, let's call it what it is, have been frustrated. I think many are guarded. I use that word when it comes to their eventual success this season. It'd be great. There's an opportunity. Forget Messi to a certain point. You can't forget him. You can't dismiss him. But go out and win another U.S. Open Cup. That would be step number one. Second, get into the playoffs. And now we're talking. Ben Olsen, excuse me, you're doing a great job. Ben Olsen, you're putting these things together. Maybe being under the radar in that way, Victor, can be something of success. So that's what's going on with the team on the field. Off the field, there were a lot of questions, literally, about, hey, what is the end game for relatively new owner of the Houston Dynamo? And what we saw this past week was an announcement, an open house, if you will, to their new headquarters. That's something that previous ownership wouldn't even talk about, knew anything, to be honest with you. They were just in a holding pattern. So do we give credit where credit is due about the investment with players like Hector Herrera, the attempt, and I'll use this as relative, to have a better stadium for fans? I think the eventual better, to me, especially with the seed, Victor, is to find a way to enclose it. But that's a huge and
Well,
big undertaking.
I'll tell you, if a Ted Siegel manages to pull that off, you have a lot of fans here in Houston. But those are the things, right? I mean, some of the decisions of the past are the things that now Ted Siegel has to fix. We've seen a lot of remodeling with the stadium, right? Different phases throughout each offseason. I think that from what we've heard, in his comments this past week, there's more to come on that. Again, like the team on the field, the results are compared to the team that's been here for the last decade and what that success has been. And like you said, when you had a previous owner who maybe put very little into the team, now you have somebody who's putting a little bit more investment. I mean, it's night and day. But where do you judge that, right? I mean, I think some fans might say, hey, I don't care if my seats are comfortable in the stadium. I want a winning team on the field, and that's all I care about, right? Other people will say, no, it's too hot. You're not going to get people out here as much. I think it is investment. I still, again, I have a little bit of the jury's still out because I'd like to see maybe investment in other areas as well, right? The customer service, the awareness of the team in the community, making it closer in those links. The academy, right? Things that maybe aren't getting that same spotlight. They just had a player, Juan Castilla, who was touted as he was going to be a big deal, and now he, basically erased from the team, gone to Colombia for very little return, and where is that future of that pipeline of players? And again, it's not all going to change overnight, and I think that's where Siegel gets the benefit of the doubt. So I think there's some good first steps, and I hope it continues on the right path with the right people around them.
Victor, I think Mr. Ted Siegel is engaged. Whether it's right or wrong is secondary to me. He is demonstrating his care with his investment. I will say this to not be, what's the word, cynical, but whether he wins or loses is secondary. Let me explain. What I mean by that, ladies and gentlemen, is that the value of his franchise continues to increase if he invests in infrastructure, if he invests in general terms. And that's one of the beauties of sports franchises. The MLS franchise is only going to increase in value. Messi is helping the value of the Houston Dynamo increase. Why? Because in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 years, when Mr. Ted Siegel says, you know what, I'm done with this, he's going to double or triple his money. That's at least the way it looks. So winning helps, of course, but that bottom line, which is important as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, if that continues increasing, he's headed in the right direction. Now, you mentioned, Victor, why are the Dynamo, why are the Dash not filling up Shell Energy? And I hear different thoughts from different people who are in different places. If you're new to MLS or NWSL, you're always comparing it to leagues that are outside the United States. If you're a youth club, if you're a youth family, you tell yourself, well, when can I go? I have practice. It's conflicting with my schedule. It's too far away if I'm in the suburbs. And also, what is my relationship relative to this team? The experiment that was the Houston, the Dynamo Dash Youth Club no longer exists. That was a relationship that was formed from the professional team to a youth club. Many clubs, and for full disclosure, I'm a director of a club, saw that as direct competition into the youth sports. Pat Onstad has said this, Victor. We're no longer going to be doing that. That's part of our past, not our future. So
Yeah,
yes.
No, but those relationships still need to be repaired. Again, just from my point of view and from what I've, researched and studied around the team for years, just because it's somebody new, and it's not necessarily just a clean slate, just because all that past still exists, right? And again, it's not going to be an overnight change, and it is going to be maybe small steps. I still think the club can choose what speed they move, right? Sure. But to me, that's where it is, and it's not just in the youth game. I think it's in the local communities. It's in the city. It's being a member of the community, and not just in name only, right? Not just to have charitable events or appear here and there or hand out a few tickets. I think it's being invested, right? With time, with the separate resources other than just monetary. I think it's again a deeper dive, and that's what it's going to take, and it's not easy work. And again, that's why I think it is investment of resources, of human resources, if we want to put it that way. To steal a phrase from Jaime Frias, the coach of the U.S. women's soccer team, I heard him in a local interview say that the human resources behind the game as well, and putting that into action.
Victor, let's take that to the next level. If you don't have good people, it really can all fall apart on you. And Houston is a strange soccer community. I've been in Houston soccer since the late 80s. Yes, I'm that old, ladies and gentlemen. My point is, I've seen franchises, I've seen soccer businesses come and go. And there's yet to be, including the MLS, including the NWSL, someone that understands, that is able to bring the soccer community together and move in one direction. And I'm saddened by that, Victor, but that's reality. Every day that I deal with youth soccer, everyone has their own way, their own path, their own approach, their own priorities. It should be that the professional franchise should be the center of it all. It should be that Shell Energy Stadium should be the cathedral to soccer. The reality is that it isn't. And you have to ask yourself why. First, take responsibility. Like you said, I like that word, if I heard it right, for your sins. You've got to own what's happened in the past. And then tell yourself, who are the people, the individuals that are going to help us bring our soccer community together? To this date, Victor, I don't believe those people, that person is in place. And it's not a criticism. I want to find that person. I wonder who that is, because I've yet to see who that person might be. It's just such a difficult task.
Yeah, well, and I think, again, it's how fast do you want this operation to advance, right? I'm not going to ask Ted Siegel to be here every day because, he's got his interest in New York as well. But I think, who he has on the ground here matters a lot. And look, this is not all to say that, there's the wrong people in charge at the moment, because I'm sure somebody will listen to this interview from the Dynamo and say, oh, they're saying that, no, I think there's good people in that building. I think we need more people, right? I think, I think it's all hands on deck. I think it's the more bodies, the better. And that's, again, when you're talking about over 10 years or about 10 years of decline, I mean, think of what the uphill battle is to put that all back, right? To combat that, and that's what they're working against. And again, the sooner they understand the deep issues of why some of these things are there, I think the sooner it can be amended.
I will say one thing, though, to close out this part of it. You can't please everybody. There will always be somebody that's disenchanted, that's upset, that's a naysayer, that would rather choose something else. But you've got to forget about that and still work toward your goals, set your goals, and do the best. And I'll be clear with you, Victor. Be an honest person in your approach to the soccer community. Listen, try to bring people together.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, without the agenda. Unfortunately, Victor, I was in a meeting recently, the beginning of the season, where local clubs were asked to come in, and there was a conversation about, look, we're moving away now from our model of our youth club. That's disappearing. That licensing marketing agreement is gone. How can we reach out to you? There was a lot of skepticism, number one. But number two, Victor, I haven't seen a follow-up, number one. Number two, everybody in that room had their own approach, their own priorities. It is so difficult to even start with someone. And then when you do make a decision, someone that maybe isn't part of the group that continues on immediately starts criticizing. So it's almost a no-win situation. I think you put your nose down, you get good quality people, you make an honest effort, and you're flexible. I think that may be the only way to make this work long-term.
Yeah, no, I go back to what you said, honesty. Especially because I'll mention down here in Texas, because I know there's, for a lot of people that come in, and I know we're a city of transplants, but down here in Texas, people don't like to be taken for a ride, right? Sure. You can mess up, and that'll be forgiven. But when you intentionally say something and you don't follow up on it, those are the things that work against you, right? And I think that, again, there's been a lot of that in the past in different areas. Again, starting with the consumer, the fan that goes out to the game, with some of the season ticket holders. I'll tell you one thing real quick, just to give an example. For next year, the renewals are ongoing for season ticket holders. I've heard some already. They're saying, well, benefits are going away. That was one of the things that was important to me, right? Getting to be a little bit closer to the team, or, feeling a little bit beloved by the team, right? And some of those things are going away now, and maybe the ticket price is going up for what I'm getting in return. These are all things that weigh in. My season ticket rep is no longer with the organization. They've switched to a new guy, or my season ticket rep changed last year, and the new guy hasn't treated me the same, right? These are all things, again, the customer service part of it as well. And I go back to that. One of the first parts, maybe, like you said, honesty. People aren't expecting you to maybe give them the world. So long as you're transparent with them and you just be upfront about what you can provide and work from there.
Here on Deportes Nation, talking to Victor Araiza, talking about soccer, soccer in America, soccer in Texas, soccer in particular in this podcast, soccer in Houston. And let's move away from the professional side, from the Dynamo, who will be playing Messi in a U.S. Open Cup final this coming week. To me, this is still all positive for our sport, Victor, talking about these things, that the World Cup is coming to Houston. I still remain optimistic that this could be a golden era for soccer. I lived the dark ages before the MLS in this city, where Pelé showed up in Houston at an HISD stadium, and maybe there were 500 people there. It's amazing to even think about that. How could you not fill a major stadium? I remember, and I wasn't here, though, when the NASL had a Houston team, the Hurricane, and they would play at the Astrodome. Yes, that building that hasn't been torn down yet. That's for another day. And maybe there were 5,000 people in that stadium. So today, this is just gravy. This is icing on the cake to some of us that have lived through the dark ages. But let's talk about the collegiate side, and in particular, U of H sports. U of H sports moving into the Big 12. U of H women's soccer, undefeated up to this point. Coach Jaime Frias ready for the challenge that's coming later in the season when they take on the big collegiate powerhouses a la Texas, a la Baylor, Oklahoma, UCF, and others. Victor, again, women's soccer in particular, and we'll get back to the Dash in a moment, more attention. We're seeing better quality every day. This may be a great moment for U of H sports, and it's starting with the women's soccer program.
Yeah, and that changed to the Big 12. obviously, the big focus locally when that change was made was obviously the football team. What it does for some of the old timers and maybe the Southwestern Conference, all
Yeah.
that stuff. But again, a byproduct of all that is what it does for the rest of the programs in the university. And certainly, women's soccer is one of them that gets a benefit now here from a little bit better competition. It still flies under the radar, right? It's still kind of shocking to me that we don't have, with the resources at some of these colleges in this state, right? The Texas A&Ms, obviously what TCU's been doing recently, that's going to be commended. But why aren't more Texas teams fighting for a national championship? Right? Why aren't they in the conversation of the Women's College Cup? Hopefully, this is one of those things that helps, at least in Houston's case, spur them forward in that sense. And I'll still say it too. Just it's still a little bit shocking to me as well why there's a lack of men's Division I programs in this state. Right? I mean, not having both of them. In a lot of these schools, again, and a lot of these communities that are big soccer cities. But we'll celebrate the big wins like this one. They're in the Big 12, and at least hopefully they'll have a great year.
Victor, let me be on the record on this one because I am a U of H alum. I am someone that played on those fields back when I was going to university in the 80s. It's been since then that many of us have said, why is there not a men's full-fledged Div 1 team at the University of Houston? I've discussed this with previous athletic directors, and I get the official story every time. Well, because of Title IX, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm getting it right, I've got to move this, and I can't possibly do that. This is an inexpensive sport. The talent is built into our city. There is zero excuse, U of H, my alma mater, my children graduated from the school, that there's no men's soccer program. I think it is a priority for our city, for this university, to change that, to turn that around. Yes, there's plenty of excuses. I'm going to say this, and I don't want to offend anyone. I think it's a lack of a soccer culture. Yes, how can you invest in all these buildings? How can you invest in all these facilities? How can you invest in going to the Big 12? Oh, and by the way, it's going to be too expensive and difficult for me to get rid of the tennis program or the golf program to bring in a men's soccer program.
Nobody's saying get rid of them.
Exactly. Add two.
In fact, right, you add two sports, right?
So look, there's got to be a way. Obviously, I'm venting because it literally has been a conversation I've had for decades, and it still, to me, lacks the vision that's necessary. U of H soccer on the men's side could be a powerhouse, Victor, without even going outside of the city or Southeast Texas to recruit. There's that much talent. There's that much interest. There's that much potential to do it and to do it right. So I'm hoping, and I don't want to sound too negative, that eventually there's an opening there and eventually cooler, smarter heads prevail. And what a recruiting tool to bring in more students. Universities are a business, ladies and gentlemen. It's about bringing in more students. How many more can come if they had a men's soccer program? So I'll stop there. I'll take my medication, Victor, I promise. But I think it's something we need to follow up on. Well, let's wrap up a little bit beyond the college game with the Dash. NWSL, it's a team that last year finally made playoffs. Last season, we were there at that match. It was beautiful to see almost a full house. How can the Dash build on that? And number one, get to the playoffs. Number one, sell out that stadium and the full stadium for the first time in their history. Is that in the cards this season for the Dash team, Victor?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think there is a lot of uncertainty there because. First of all, I don't see them necessarily playoff bound. I know it's, the NWSL now has added more playoff spots, and it's kind of like the MLS where, everybody's mathematically alive. I would like to see the best of the Dash, honestly. And that's one of those things when we talk about Ted Siegel's investment. I'd like to see more attention there also on the Dash side. And I know it's maybe, you got to pick your battles, right? You got two teams. You got to maybe find your moments to where you prioritize one. Maybe they might say, well, the Dash made the playoffs last year, and Now it's a Dynamo's turn, right? And that's I don't know necessarily their approach. I'm just saying from what I see. But when I talk about the marketing of the Dynamo, I mean, it hurts me even more because I think, if before here in Houston we've complained about the lack of resources behind the Dynamo, it's even less behind the Dash,
Sure.
right? And I know, and I've seen the show commercial. I'd like to see more stories about these players, right? I'd like to see them again, just like the Dynamo players, more in the community, making those links, people knowing who they are, people knowing they exist, right? Seeing the logo visible around town. I think that's what it's going to take. And again, it's not always comparing ourselves to Europe or to South America. Let's compare ourselves here to the United States. How is it that other markets have found it viable to make the women's game popular?
Yeah.
And here we are in, what is it, the fourth, maybe third largest city in the United States, and we can't get people out to games. I mean, I think there's something there that, isn't quite right, and I know people say, well, in Portland, maybe it's, the history. We got history here in Houston. You mentioned it. I mean, you go back 20, 30 years, you go back all the way, I think, to the 60s. There's a lot of professional soccer history here in Houston. Again, it's not to attack. I think it's hopefully to awaken these markets. The Dash have great players. They have some tremendous athletes there. Some of these ladies just came back from the Women's World Cup, and I think we hear sometimes too of some of the stories we do get to hear, right? Extracurricular activities that Michelle Alozzi, for example, right? Works in the medical center. Maybe play soccer on the side, however you want to paint it. But I mean, I think it's incredible. Maybe they're in the sense of where men's soccer was 20 years ago, right? Where some of them have to have side jobs. I don't know. Maybe the salaries are a little bit better now, the funding. But I think again, it's just pushing the women's game, investing in the women's game, and it's also doing the other work too, right? With that investment, it's not so much as just throwing money at the team, but making those connections and making them a popular team.
Victor, let's close with that. Let's close with the Women's World Cup, and then we'll close with Houston 2026. But the Women's World Cup, the expectation was that the United States would win. They've made choices that are social, Victor, and with those choices, there are consequences that people will or won't follow your product. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm not saying that Megan Rapinoe is everyone's cup of tea. She has her following, but she put herself in a situation where it was either like me or don't. You're either with me or you're against me. I think that extreme approach, Victor, is losing the casual fan. I think that extreme approach to you either do it my way or don't do it at all, or you're not supporting me, that's got no place in the growth of the sport. So I think that's a mistake. I'm curious to see if U.S. Soccer will wake up and say, you know what? We're still a sport that needs fans, especially the casual fan. What are we going to do to endear ourselves to that fan, Victor? Not alienate them, which apparently happened. You saw the social media past the team, the U.S. women's national team being losing and being out of the World Cup. It was brutal. I don't think I've seen such criticism, and even so-called mainstream media really beating up U.S. women's national team. And I think by association, beating up soccer, which is the worst part of this.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of things play into it. I think like we talked about earlier here, a deeper dive into, or at least a deeper dive coming, from the soccer journalist, right? What is the coverage of the game? This team was a little bit more polarizing than the previous, but it's also a team that maybe from a sporting approach, thought that, like you said, they were just going to walk in and win because they were the U.S. and the rest of the world plays soccer too, right? and I think and for years now they've been making strides, and now we've hit the point where they all finally caught up. That's a big part of the story as well. Does the U.S. have enough talent? I think it does. but like the men's team, right? That maybe like the veteran figures hadn't moved on, right? You needed that influx of youth. This women's team didn't have that in this tournament either. Maybe if you had that, you could have gone all the way and won it, and maybe you would have, you could have had both of those things. I kind of, if you want to compare it to something American sports, right? The Kaepernick in the NFL. I think it all goes to what can players provide on the field. Can they provide results? Because it starts with that, and then the activism is a side product of that they can use if they choose to. Everybody has their own platform. I know we live in that part of it nowadays, but first comes the product on the field.
It should,
and the U.S. simply didn't have it.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. It should. Because if we talk sporting wise, Rapinoe probably shouldn't have gone to the World Cup, not based on what she was doing in the NWSL.
And look, that's an easy one. I think we could all see the level drop, and of course, missing a penalty kick, it makes it difficult. Look, I'm not trying to bash on her.
But Alex Morgan as well. Like I said, if we're paying attention to the local league, we've seen, just in the local league itself, how these players have taken a step back, and it's not the same as just expecting them to go out there and win your game in the Women's World Cup.
Well, I think it comes back to the focus. Is the focus on off the field? Is the focus on sponsorships? Is the focus on my social and political issues? I think the priority should be what you do on the field first and foremost. Everything else can fall into place. Yes, the attention's important. And by the way, whatever your cost should be, sports have changed, Victor. But I think we should be open. We should be open to anyone's political and social causes. If someone's going to talk about X, then let someone talk about Y. And let's do it respectfully. And let's do it in an environment where, we can agree to disagree. I think that's the extremism that I'm talking about. I'm not even judging the values or merits of any position, of any social stance. It's the way it's being perceived because you've put yourself in that situation. Again, if you're not with me, you're against me. To me, that's extreme.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with taking a position. There's nothing wrong in believing something. All of us have to stand for things. And at times, it's look, this is the line I've drawn. But when you get to that point and someone else drew another line, what are you going to do? So back to U.S. soccer, I think the leadership, which continues to change, by the way, and I've always talked about this, Victor, what is one of the most corrupt organizations in the planet? It's FIFA. FIFA is the entity that controls U.S. soccer, and U.S. soccer is the entity that we all look up to guide us in the sport. Something's wrong with that. I don't quite know how to figure that one out, but from the youth to the professional, if the U.S. Soccer Federation is the entity that's guiding us and it's under FIFA, think about that connection. And it makes you really wonder, how did we get into this?
There's a lot of money to be made in soccer and in sports altogether. Like you said, sports, if you look at the NFL, the other leagues, the NBA, I mean, they've all changed a lot, in their own ways. A lot of it has been the commercial aspect of it. Some of it is rightfully so, athletes asking for more share of the cut, right? I mean, just like we've seen it in the music industry and other industries as well. I mean, they're the ones providing the product. Like you said, we can always have that argument if there's X, but let's also talk about Y. But I think that's, again, maybe that's our position also as media, to not get caught up in that, like you said, to not make it a versus B, right? To be maybe the center of the line, the objectivity, what sort of brings it back a little bit to reality, or when truth has to be spoken, to be said, and when there's whether it's good or bad, right? I mean, give credit where credit is due, and also point out when things aren't going the right way. So I think as long as we have that balance, that's part of where media is, maybe unofficially, but that I always like that description, the fourth estate.
And Victor, to me, there's a difference between being the media and being a journalist. I think there's a big distinction. Anyone with a camera, with a microphone, with a podcast can say, look, I'm in the media expressing my opinion, expressing my perspective. But I think a true journalist looks at multiple sides to an issue, asks questions, doesn't take a response at face value, but does the work of confirming what has been said, what has been told, what things are there. That quote-unquote truth is so important to our society. And you're right, we cannot lose that journalistic instinct. And I know every media outlet, now I changed the word on purpose, is there also as a business. It has to work that way because people need to be paid, people have bills, and that's part of this. So the sponsorship side is really important. But let's close, Victor, on a positive note, I think. The optimism going into the 2026 World Cup, and in particular that Houston will be a host city. That still, to me, again, is a dream come true. I remember 1994. I remember going up to the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. I don't remember anything but being on a cloud that I was watching the World Cup in Texas, that I was watching the World Cup in the United States. It really, to me, is still a milestone in soccer in our country. Isn't it exciting to think about what's coming in 2026, and in particular to our city of Houston?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, maybe again, there's a lot of commercial reasons for this coming to the United States, but the beauty of the game, and maybe that's what we're always sort of fighting for, right? Is the purity of the game, is simply what it is, right? The world competition, the tradition that it has had over many of our lives, what it means for the next generation coming forward. Having these games here, being able to live these games, being a part of this celebration of the sport, putting our own part into it. Every city, every community, especially in these three host countries, and maybe potentially with the women's game as well. I mean, that's being talked about potentially coming in 2027. It's going to be a pinnacle moment. I think another one, right? Where this sport just keeps advancing in this country. And I'm like you, I'm excited for it, and I'm excited for what it means.
It's a lot that's coming in a very positive way. Victor, as we close up, look, it's always an honor to be with you. You're joining the Deportes Nation team. We'll be talking not only about soccer in English and Spanish. We'll be covering other sports. So it's really truly an honor to be with you. We're doing this kind of soft launch. So if some of you have sat through our entire podcast, you're getting privy to some news that'll be announced here shortly. But Victor, it's always an honor to be with you. I think we need more soccer coverage, and we want also you fans to be a part of this conversation. We'll find a way to integrate you in the future. And Victor, people can find us on social media, whether it's Twitter, now X, by the way. I think I'm so used to Twitter, I don't know how I'm going to call this X thing. Right?
I think I still call it Twitter, but yeah, it's growing by the day because now there's Threads, which is the Meta, the Instagram, Facebook one. Obviously, TikTok has been added into all this stuff, so it's ever growing.
Does that mean we have to dance then? We have to do a dance to get some attention, Victor?
We might have to adapt with the time.
Whatever it takes. Victor, I'll let you have the last word before we close. The beginning of a new chapter. I enjoyed this chat, and again, people can find us. People can chime in and also be part of the conversation. But final word here as we close out the segment.
Yeah, the invitation's out. We're extending the olive branch, if you will. To follow our coverage, to again, feedback's always welcome, and then hopefully we can bring you the best part of some of the local sports and some of your favorite sports.
Absolutely. On behalf of Victor Araiza, I'm Alex Parra. We thank all of you that have sat through this, our first English language soccer segment, soccer podcast. Help us, by the way, find a good name for this. I have a couple of ideas, Victor. I'm sure you do too, but eventually we'll be naming this. But we appreciate all of you watching. Thanks to our production team, and mostly, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to all of you that have taken the time to follow us, to find us here on Deportes Nation.